Let's discuss the magnitude of all this losing the White Sox are doing with my guest next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sportsing like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And the losing the White Sox keep doing is historic. The franchise had never lost more than 14 games in a row. They have blown past that mark when they reached, obviously, it's gotten up to 20 games and counting. Pretty bad for a franchise that has been around since 1900. And full disclosure, I am recording this episode before the Oakland A's game. Now, there is a portion of the fan base that wants to see the Sox lose more games than the 1962 New York Mets, be even worse than the 2003 Detroit Tigers. The one thing about hoping for that is all the magnitude of this losing. And joining me to discuss that is SoxOn35ths.com, Jordan Lazowski. And Jordan, you had a tweet recently, and if you're not following Jordan, you're really missing out, folks. At JLazowski14, you said, I don't think we're fully grasping the magnitude of 20 straight losses. 20 in a row. Even the worst teams run into a win by accident once in a while. Insanity. Can you please describe the magnitude of the losing streak?
Yeah, well, first off, Todd, thanks for having me on. And I don't know if people are really missing out by not following me, but hey, I'll take a few extra follows here and there every time. The whole magnitude of this is, I don't know, maybe it's from a coaching perspective. Like I've come from having a summer baseball team that, we did not have a good summer. We were 5-15 in the summer. So it's that same sort of 20 game period. But at the same time, like eventually everything clicks just even once for one day. Like, if you want to go mathematically, statistically, all that good stuff, like eventually the odds are the odds. And eventually the odds are right. Like in this case of 20, it's like the same idea of, hey, if I flip fair coin 50 times or 20 times, I guess, for this example, like the odds of getting tails or heads every time, the same result 20 consecutive times, is very difficult. So if you take like win probabilities for each individual game for the White Sox and really tried to map that out, the fact that we've gotten here is insane. It's something like we're seeing like the 98 Orioles. It doesn't happen that often. And we're just kind of used to like, oh my God, like, oh, this might as well be happening in this terrible season. But it's crazy when you really step back and say, like, in 20 consecutive games, like you didn't run into a pitcher who had an off day. And if you did, your pitcher had an off day. Or you lost every single pitcher's duel. Or every lead you had in the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, you blew. That shouldn't be able to happen. And it has. And I just think there's something about it that, once it's all said and done, like going through game by game would be a task for somebody. But it would be interesting just to say, how did you get here? Like what had to transpire to get to this point?
Yeah, and I think what people are missing is okay, if you want to hold this on Jerry Reinsdorf and make him wear it, that's fine. But they have almost come to accept that they're going to lose. They've lost 20 straight games. Again, we're recording this before the game tonight. So if they lose again, that's 21 straight. And it just seems like, okay, we lost, whatever, let's move on. And I think that should be a little frustrating. I don't know how you feel about that.
Getting to 20, I don't know how I would feel, to be honest with you. Like, again, coaching a team that goes through a rough stretch is like, yeah, it's as a coach, if you're looking at Grifol in this scenario, like it is your job to find a way, make a joke of it, something. I don't know. You got to try. I know it's not a joke. It's Major League Baseball, but make a joke about it or something like, hey, it can't keep happening. Like, I don't know. It's got to be frustrating. It's got to be just mentally draining to go up there, the pressure you're putting on yourself. Think about it from the opposite perspective. Teams that win 20 plus games, like the Oakland Athletics, Cleveland Guardians, teams that do that, think of the pressure you're putting on yourself that way, where it's like, oh, we want to extend this. We want to extend this. Like at a certain point, you're kind of playing with house money, and that's fine. But it's still the pressure of being there and saying, hey, we are close to something historic. It's the same way here, but it's like, oh my God, this is not a record we want. So it's the same sort of added pressure, but with all the frustrations of it that you're mentioning. Like, this should not be happening. Someone's got to be held accountable. Heads got to roll, all that kind of stuff. It's just, again, when you really, it may be a task I take on, but it's definitely one someone should take on of game by game. Like, what was the win probability going in? What had to happen for this to happen? How high did their win probability get in a game? How low did it get before the ultimate loss? Like, that's the kind of stuff that if you really break it down would be, I think, insane to look at just from a numbers perspective of it is so hard to get here.
Right. And the other thing is the old cliche doesn't even apply to the White Sox where they say, hey, you're guaranteed to win 60, you're guaranteed to lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42. Like, they haven't even gotten to winning 30. Like, that's the most amazing thing in that. And a lot of it is because, as you've said, like the win probability, they blow a save. How many times has the bullpen done that? And yet here are the White Sox not doing much to revamp the bullpen. And that's kind of another thing that can be a little frustrating. But do you think the White Sox front office is saying, losing streak like this, it's okay by not firing Pedro Grifol?
To be honest with you, I think it's gotten to the point that the front office understands what we all understand now. It would be simply performative. Like, and that's fine if that's what fans would like and they'd like it and they get like 5-10 minutes of satisfaction from it. I'm fine with that. It's just, I view it from their standpoint that at a certain point, when you are 60 games under 500, you haven't even won 30 yet, and it's August. Like, what does it matter? Like, make him see this out and just, you got to wear this, dude. Because who wants to go? Like, why does Charlie Montoyo deserve to have to take this over, essentially, or bring up Dershly or Santos? Why do one of them deserve to have to take this on? They weren't part of the creation of it as much as Grifol or Getz was. The reason they haven't fired him yet, honestly, is probably just, hey, maybe they try and sneak a win in there so he doesn't have to go out with this losing streak. I could see that happening. Reality is I could also see him just saying, you know what? No one deserves to be in this situation more than the person who's in it, who had a hand in kind of developing this team. You're going to wear it, and you're not coming back next year.
Okay. That's the actual first time I've heard a perspective where, okay, it makes sense to let him finish out the season. Let him wear it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've not been a fan of, well, they're going to be bad with or without him. Like, to me, that's just like saying, well, that's just like throwing your hands up in the air and saying, let's do nothing for this, when we've tried nothing and we've run out of deal, options.
Right.
Like the Simpsons episode where Ned Flanders and the Beatnik parents, like, we've tried nothing and we got no other ideas.
Exactly.
Like that type of stuff. But hey, if you really want to make Pedro wear it, because, he didn't build the roster, but he has contributed to some of these losses as being like a prep coach. Wouldn't you agree that he has contributed to at least some of this that we're seeing?
Yeah. At a certain point, managers got to wear certain decisions that, especially in close ball games, when those decisions are magnified compared to another blowout game, like, it just doesn't matter what you're doing that day. I think with Grifol, it's a combination of, like, truly, yes. If someone else managed this, like, it wouldn't make a difference. They'd maybe win a couple games, kind of like we saw with Miguel Cairo when Tony La Russa stepped away. Yeah, you're going to get a little bit of dead cat bounce, whatever. It is what it is. It does go beyond that, like you're saying. It's just not enough to say, oh, no one would be better, so we're kind of just letting it ride. At a certain point, like it is, it's just finish it out. You've dug this grave. You own a part of this. You don't own all of it. The front office takes the brunt. So do the players. But you have a hand in this too. If they were going to get rid of him, just do it at the All-Star break or do it at an earlier time. Now you're just so deep into this. Who wants to come? Who do you want to burden with this for the next 2 months? Like, I just don't see where it's fair isn't the right word. But if you're going to stick an interim title on someone who really wants to prove they can potentially be a major league manager one day, maybe outside of a guy like Montoya, who already has evidence of it, but like, you're going to stick him with this? This is the case you get to give as a manager, is this? Like, the person come in and you got to kind of think about them too.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense because at first I thought, well, why not give Charlie a 2-month runway, just because you're probably not going to get Skip Schumacher. I mean, I know that's the reports, but when have the White Sox ever outbid somebody, to get a player or a manager? And he's already trying to flee a dysfunctional situation anyway in Florida. So why do you think he's going to come here? So I get it, but when you're saying that, that makes sense. So I finally have heard a very good logical explanation on that. And Jordan, you're also good for some hot takes, and I wanted to discuss one that you had recently. So we're going to discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Order supplies from the website that's made for the skilled trades. Find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands in just a couple of clicks at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com gives you 24 access to a huge selection of plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the U.S. Need help with an order? Get industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team and talk to a real person every time. And there's a great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry professionals can join their free Trade Master program for free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust the Trade Master program to deliver results. Apply for your membership today and get a competitive advantage on every order at SupplyHouse.com/TM. Save money and time when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from SupplyHouse.com. Real people, real service. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox continue a 3-game series with the Oakland A's tonight. The first pitch is at 8:40 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm joined by Jordan Lazowski from SoxOn35th.com. You also host one of their very excellent podcasts. And Jordan, where can we normally find that podcast?
Yeah, so it's Sox on 35th is the main one. So at Sox on 35th, you'll find all the good stuff there. The minor league one we do, Pipeline to 35th, at Pipeline to 35th. We're real creative with names. But so those are the two we run. Michael Suero does a great job with some of the minor league stuff. And it's been an area where, hey, this is something we know we want to cover, especially with how this team's going. So he's done an awesome job taking up that mantle as well.
Yeah, you and Future Sox and Sox Southside Sox even do some pretty good minor league stuff, to the point where, I run the Southside Showdown, and a part of me is like, I can't compete with these guys.
It's not even just that. It's hard. It's just hard to find someone who's into it. I think that was the hardest part was, without Michael, we'd be writing farm reports, and that's really it. Like, someone's got to be there to analyze it. I think that's the hardest part. And I give credit to those guys who, without a lot of data, especially, I'm a data numbers nerd. So I think about it like those guys who don't have a lot of information presented to them every day to do some of the stuff they do is pretty awesome.
Yeah. And it sounds like the White Sox farm system doesn't have a lot of data to work with, which you'd like them to have.
Right.
We're there. So I talked about the report of Pedro Grifol upsetting the clubhouse with the post All-Star speech and making BP mandatory. I talked about that on a previous show. Now the report's been disputed on exactly what was said. Gavin Sheets said the speech was not as bad as some of his teammates let 670 The Score's Shane Reardon and the Chicago Sun-Times' Darryl Van Schouwen know. But the next clue of the clubhouse growing tired of Pedro was last Friday night in the 8th inning, when reliever Steven Wilson clearly brushes off Grifol for pulling him with 2 outs after Wilson gives up 5 runs. and he gave the lame response technically of it being nothing. Now, he could be mad that he gave up a lot of runs. He could also be mad that this guy's really pulling me with 2 outs left in a blowout game, and he let me out here to wear it. But you had a great hot take, Jordan, on you tweeted that out. You had that hot take about this is being nothing. Why do you think this is a nothing burger?
So it's actually funny why I think so. It's from a coaching mindset. I have gone out for mound visits and guys have just been F-bombing me, whatever, just mad in that moment. And a lot of people are looking at this moment and saying it's a lack of respect. Unless I completely have the wrong tune, my players don't respect me. That could very well be the case. I'm not denying that possibility. I'm just saying from the standpoint of, you're a professional, you're in the heat of the moment. And you're both adults, most importantly, to where, hey, I just gave up 5 runs. I had some shoddy defense played behind me, gave up a bomb right after I thought I should have been out of the inning. And I haven't been pitching well recently. Like, I'm kind of pissed. And I don't know if it was anybody else who would have walked out there that he would have acted differently. Was kind of where I was going from. Like, in the heat of the moment, guys just say things or do things that when you calm down, like it's the competitor in you in that moment. And then calmer heads prevail later on. Again, people said in the comments, like, well, what if one of the kids did that to you? Number one, they do. That's just the reality of the situation. I'm a young coach. It's going to happen. But I never take personal offense to it. Maybe I should, based on what people are telling me. But I never take offense to it simply because I know how I was. I've definitely done that to coaches, and it's not because I didn't respect them or I disagreed with them or whatever. Maybe I was mad at them in the moment, but more often than not, I'm mad at something that happened either behind me or that I directly caused. So, like, especially the kid versus adult and adult versus adult are 2 different avenues too with all of this. You've just seen it so many times in the game where a guy is just frustrated with how things are going and they let it show a little bit. I think that's simply what happened.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about this before I hit the record button. Is it a sign? Maybe, like, it wasn't as bad as I remember 2001, the Brewers. That was the year that they lost like 100 games, and it was Jerry Royster. He was the interim manager, and Mike Dejan just cursed him out. I don't think he wanted to come out. I think it was more of the competitive advantage. And the only thing that I could speculate is maybe Wilson was upset. Like, I know the defense was poor, but still, like, you're leaving me out here to take out 5 runs. Really? Come on, dude. Like, you couldn't have pulled me, or, just let me finish this, that type of thing.
That's another angle it could have been too. I think maybe there is a frustration element of why am I still out here, but you see it all the time. Guys will yell at their manager, especially 10 years ago when we still had some true, like, long-term Cy Young ace type guys in their careers in the game, barking at their manager in the dugout. Like, don't you dare take me out. And manager's like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. Like, I don't think that's a lack of disrespect or a lack of respect. I think that's a competitive nature thing. I think where you toe that line a little bit, I think the best example, kind of the example you gave a few years ago, Gabe Kapler was still managing the Giants. Zach Liddell got pulled from a game, turned around and said something to the manager as he was walking off the mound. Kapler kind of just let it go in the moment. And then when he got in the dugout, he's like, you and me in the tunnel now. Like, you're not going to do that. I think if Wilson had said something, I would feel differently, because the Littell Kapler one, that's more of a sign of disrespect. Still competitive nature, but you don't do it in the heat of that moment, especially with words. I think that's where I might have felt differently, is if Wilson had said something, but he didn't. He just kind of brushed Grifol, maybe got too close to him. Like, again, I've had it happen. I've seen it happen. And if he had given up no runs, like, maybe I'd feel differently. I think there's just so much context to the situation that the video didn't show that I feel like fans were missing.
All right, being someone who is there at the beginning of a player's development, especially at the prep level, have you seen a coach this bad at developing players? Because I was thinking about that. Has anybody really gotten better under Pedro Grifol? I don't really think so. Like, you got the Luis Robert Jr. season last year, but he's kind of back to inconsistent. Garrett Crochet, do you really put his development with Pedro? I mean, have you really ever seen a manager this bad when it comes to like making players better or helping them get better?
It's hard for me just because I haven't ever been on a major league staff or in a major league dugout. Like, where does the manager's role come in? Is he just saying, hey, like Mike Tosar's in that dugout as well. Those two are guys that have been close for years at Kansas City. Does he just say, hey, hitting you and Tim's go ahead, you guys run hitting, I'm hands off? Or does he try and get involved and kind of set his standard? Same thing with pitching. I think between Bannister and Katz, Grifol's probably hands off there. And I think his background is more on the hitting side as well. It just depends on where, my opinion is that it depends on where he inserts himself. If guys aren't getting better and he's super hands off and is like, the staff is going to do what the staff knows how to do, then he's guilty by, I guess, association in this case, where it's like, hey, you let them run it. They didn't do their job. You're going to be held responsible for that as well, because your choice was to stay hands off. Now, if he's more hands on, then he has a more direct guilt behind it. Developing is, especially the major league level, is hard because, and I've said this before, the gap between AAA and the major leagues in terms of talent is getting huge right now. Like, you're not learning as much as you need to at the AAA level anymore because that level is stagnating. Major leagues continues to get better and better and better. So this gap continues to grow. So it's hard for me to pinpoint it on someone. That being said, you also have to consider that who has developed as a hitting guy for the White Sox, I mean, other than Tim Anderson over the years. Like, what guy has really come and gotten better as he's played more with this organization? My general philosophy and my opinion on it is just, it goes farther up than the manager, but there are things that he can do in terms of, who's in charge of instruction, who's in charge of hitting drills, who's in charge of setting scouting reports, things like that, that I feel go into player development. That's more where I feel his leadership might be lacking, is how are you preparing these guys to succeed versus what drills are you doing with Eloy Jimenez to help him fix his bat path, things like that. Like, I leave that to the hitting coaches, I think, in my head when I look at, like, what's a manager doing?
Yeah. Well, let's tap into your coaching background to discuss why hitting is down this year and finding some best practices to develop hitters for a franchise that is struggling to develop them. Let's talk about that next on Locked On White Sox. And I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Team USA's men's basketball is taking on Brazil today. There's some good props to play. First basket, Steph Curry is at plus 600. And first team basket for him is at plus 380. LeBron James to score 20 plus is plus 235. And with Steph, it's at plus 470. Devin Booker is at plus 320 for making 3+ trays. The first half money line for a tie, plus 5,000. Now, you don't want to root for a tie, but if that happens, you throw down, say, $5 on that, you can win $250. So head over to FanDuel and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And the Sox continue a 3-game series with the Oakland A's tonight. The first pitch is at 8:40 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter, joined by Jordan Lazowski of SoxOn35th.com and also associate head coach of Montini, right?
Correct, yes.
There we go. And then you also, you got some scout teams that you work for the prep league, correct?
Yeah, so with the East Coast Dodgers, affiliated with the Los Angeles Dodgers, all the teams running out of the East Coast, as well as some work with USA Baseball. So I do a lot of work with prep guys.
Yeah. So why do you think hitting is down in the big leagues this season?
Oh, pitching. So I do all this work with the prep guys, but for Montini, I'm a pitching coach for the most part. So even down to that level, pitching is so much better. And the reason being, pitching in terms of like the analytics and the development behind it, pitch design, all those key buzzwords you hear all the time, it's so much further along for pitchers than it is for hitters. Hitters are continuing, if you think about like a game theory of, like the pitcher is setting the strategy, the hitter's reacting to it. Pitchers are always going to be ahead of hitters. And you're constantly, in my opinion, you're constantly trying to close that gap, but it's harder and harder as, pitching development continues to improve. Fastballs continue to be faster. Pitches continue to move different ways. Like, we're finding ways to defy how a pitch technically moves based on how it comes out of the hand. Like, hitters got it rough is the long and short of it. And I think that's going to continue to be a thing in the major leagues and all the way down. And you're seeing it just all, like I said, even down to the high school level. Like, I'm 27. I was in high school about 10 years ago. Oh my God, these kids are way more talented than what I was seeing and even what I was. Like, it's incredible how kids continue to get better and better. And that just works its way all the way up. And it's development, it's training routines, it's everything that goes into being a ball player, making its way all the way up the chain and all the way back down at the same time.
So maybe what is the best way to go about developing hitting? Is it more like, okay, with the velocity, hey, should you just maybe try to sit on that fastball, square it up, and just foul off as many pitches as you can? Is it changing your swing plane? It seems like, I've read, I forgot where I listened, but like some people I think are still subscribing to the old Ted Williams way of hitting, like find that spot in the box and go for it. Like, what's the best way to go about developing hitting in this, in this day and age?
You have to be willing to make adjustments. That was one thing I saw over this summer, coaching more than I think I'd seen it before. If you're unwilling to make adjustments, you're going to struggle mightily. That's the first thing. Like at bat, tat, bat, pitch to pitch, like you don't want to overthink. Like the idea of over information is a very real thing. And it starts at the high school level. It starts before that. Let's be honest. So over information is always the risk, but the opposite side of that risk is going up to the plate and be like, I'm going to hit a fastball. Like it's just not going to work that way. Like I've talked to kids before. It's like, what pitch do you like to hit? And they're like, fastball. I'm like, fastball where? Like inside, outside, up, down? Like you need to start by like an approach and then being willing to alter that approach and just make adjustments on the fly. Things like thinking about hitting is insanely important. I think so many of the greats have gotten by and have said things like Derek Jeter, I just looked for fastballs. Sometimes that works for guys. It's just not an all one size fits all strategy. And I think probably for Jeter, there was a little bit more that went into that too, but it is what it is. I think the second piece of that is knowing what kind of a ball player you are. And that's the harder part, I think, for guys is, and this is going to sound so anti-modern analytical baseball, but it's not. Like the idea of a true launch angle oriented swing is not for every single player. Like if I went out there and tried that, I would suck more than I did. Like I am not a big guy. I never was. And if I tried that swing, it wouldn't have worked for me. There was an approach that worked for the ball player I was. In today's game, with how guys are going to hitting instructors and things like that, it's becoming more of a one-size-fits-all strategy that like I said, you kind of got to avoid. Of, you can't teach the next Aaron Judge the same way you teach the next Nick Madrigal, I guess, for opposite sides of the spectrum. Like, the way those guys approach hitting, yes, absolutely. The big 6'2" kid that's a D1 prospect, yeah, absolutely. Teach him that way. Like, yeah, here's the uppercut swing. Like, you're selling out for power. The other guys, like, hey, let's learn how to hit line drives, backspin the ball, and go the other way with it. Like, you have to be willing as a coach, not just willing, but able and understanding of the different approaches for the kid that's in front of you. And I think that's where it gets lost. I think the third thing of that is, and it kind of goes along with the first two, is just pulling them together and being willing and not just understanding who you are, but being willing to make that change. Like being willing to understand this is not who I am, or this is not like the player where I'm at right now. I need to make these changes. And when you put that all together, I think you get closer. But if there's one other thing that I think kids should focus on more, or prep guys should focus on more, it's bat to ball skills. I think I was having a conversation with one of my players. He was like, well, I think this part of my swing is limiting some of my power potential. I'm like, dude, you are ripped. You are huge. You are putting balls off the wall. Like, how much extra power do you think you're getting? Like, and he said, well, if I made this change, I feel like I wouldn't feel as comfortable attacking pitches in the zone. I'm like, that would be the issue. Like, you have to have the bat to ball skills to start off on, and then you can add the power back to it. But if there's two huge kids that can post great exit velocities and one has better bat to ball skills than the other, guess who they're taking? That's kind of what it comes down to at the end of the day. And it funnels down that whole process of understanding who you are and understanding what you need to do to be the best version of yourself. I know it's a long-winded answer, but you got me on a good topic.
Can I give you an amen and a hallelujah? You just preached to the choir, man, because
I know certain topics, if you get me, I'll just keep going. I'm like, oh my God, I don't shut up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, obviously I'm not the biggest guy, was never going to be playing high school ball, that type of stuff. But one of the things that I have theorized or hypothesized is, and I loved how you just married that. I have no problem with launch angle. Like I believe the White Sox should have at least a minimum of 5 power hitters because that's what plays to the park. What I've seen though in today's modern era is what you just said, bat to ball skills. And my hypothesis is, like, if I were a GM or if I were an owner, I would say once it gets to 0-2 or 1-2, that's when I want you focusing on just get the dang ball in play. Get it in play because good things can happen. As you said, maybe you got to shorten up your swing. Maybe you got to have, the uppercut swing and then the contact swing. Or what was it? I just heard a story over the weekend. Like Ryan Braun was joking around. They talked about, he's like, hey, can I use my home run swing today? And they're like, wait, you were not like crushing the ball in the minors? He's like, watch this. And he was just elevating more and he was just crushing home runs in that game. Like, I would love to see that more. And that's just hearing that just reinforces, hey, let's have an approach at least at 0-2, 1-2, and then if it gets to 2-2, 3-2, then yeah, launch away if you have a power hitter. But then on the flip side, I've always theorized then you need to have at least 3 contact guys that can run for the White Sox, because look at the 93 team and look at the 05 team. They had guys that could run that weren't necessarily power hitters too, because they could get from first to third, that type of stuff. That's just my take, my hypothesis. You could say I'm wrong because you obviously have way more knowledge than me on that. But I just love I just love what you just said, and that was great. And I would love to have you on again to talk more hitting and more White Sox baseball. But we do have to run. This wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link on Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And again, just full disclosure, Jordan and I are just recorded this before the game started, so hopefully the White Sox have actually won. But if they haven't, well, we still wanted to talk about the magnitude of this losing streak. I'll be back tomorrow with another Way Back Wednesday. Again, Jordan, thank you for joining me. Again, where can we find all your great stuff?
Oh, of course. Anytime. Would love to come back on, Todd. At JLazowski14 is my Twitter, X handle, whatever. At Sox on 35th, at Pipeline to 35th. That's where all of our writers are doing their incredible work. We wouldn't be anything without them, and Joe Binder, who runs it all. He and I make a good team, and I think it's been awesome to have him, and for more importantly, have him bring me along for the ride, because it's his page at the end of the day. So we make a good team, long story short, and we're proud of all the people who do such great work for us. So, but appreciate you having us on as well.
Yeah, no problem, man. Feel free to leave comments about today's interview with Jordan Lazowski. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.